Hi, this is Justin Beam with Shout Factory and Reverend Entertainment. Happy to have with me today Larry Franco. Larry, thank you for being on the track.
Hello, Justin. Yeah, I'm happy to be here. This will be fun.
You said you had a story right off the bat about that intro there, the 20th Century Fox logo and their famous music.
Yeah, I'm sure that everybody's heard that music before. I wish I could. I'm not musical, so I can't do it. But whatever that fanfare music is, all the horns, John did not want that overplaying over the logo for the beginning of the movie. And there was a lot of discussion about it. I don't want to say argument, but discussion anyway. And in the end, John won out. So I think it's one of the few Fox movies that you'll see that doesn't have that fanfare playing over the logo.
Interesting. Did he feel that it would somehow compromise the vibe of the film? Was that his
Yeah,
thought on it?
I think he just didn't want the movie to start with that. Yeah, I think that it was important to him that we just started out on the right foot, and that kind of was that's not part of the movie, so he wanted that to be separate.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think obviously the score for this is such an integral part of the story being told and rightfully celebrated over time. And it would make sense that he wants that to stand by itself as the audio representation of the story.
Yeah, right. John's very particular about
So
his music, so that was yeah, it was important to him.
I'd like to ask you first, before we get into everything with Big Trouble here, is that when you first made your way into the business, you actually were working as an extra, right? When you first got into the biz?
Yeah, yeah, I did. First job ever was on a Partridge Family episode in 1972, July of 1972. 7 a.m. call, Columbia Ranch, stage 29. I still remember it. Told me to bring a change of wardrobe. I had my whole closet in the back of my car. They told me to wear TV makeup, which I didn't know what that was. So my wife just smeared makeup all over me. It was one of those classic overkill. I was sitting in my car an hour and a half before my call because I was afraid
Yeah.
I was going to get killed in traffic. Anyway, yeah, I started as an extra, and then I worked my way into production, and then worked my way up from there.
And you met John through Kurt, right? Through
I
Kurt Russell.
Yeah, I met
Is
John
that,
through Kurt. I wasn't working at the time, and Kurt calls and said, uh, "This is I." It was Elvis, and Kurt says, "I got the greatest job in the world. I'm going to play Elvis Presley, and it's this TV movie." I said, "That's enough, Kurt. I don't do television." By then I was a big shooter, second AD, so I didn't want any part of doing any television. So 3 days later, he calls me and says, "Hey, they're going to hire my dad to play my dad in the movie." And it would just be we'll just have some fun, and it'll be great. You can leave it off your resume if you want. I go, okay, okay, okay. Well, so I arranged through the production manager who I knew uh, to meet with John on the movie, and so we hit it off right away after that meeting, and then that started the whole ball rolling. So, and then right after that, I did every movie that John did for a long time.
yeah, yeah, Elvis was such a huge step for him and for
For
Kurt as
Kurt,
well, who was,
Kurt, yeah,
yeah,
especially, yeah.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And so I'd like to ask them, when you first met John, what was your impression of him? Because you guys are both young guys getting into the business. What was your first impression of him?
Well, I was impressed by the fact that he was, to me, was this cool guy sitting back, had this long hair. He'd been through USC, and I just knew his reputation because I checked him out a little bit. He'd done Halloween, and I just thought he was this really. My first impression was, man, this guy is cool. And then it went from there. But when I first walked in, it was like, okay, this is going to be a bell-bottom pants, smoking a cigarette, drinking a cup of coffee, the whole 9 yards. It was just classic John Carpenter. Yeah, it's great.
Well, John's story is well known, but how did you get involved with entertainment, period? I mean, you obviously mentioned the story about starting out as an extra, but before that,
Bef-
prior to that, what led you into the business?
What led me into the business is I went to school. I grew up in a really small town. I went to college at University of California at Santa Cruz. I met a girl there. Eventually, we got married, and it happened to be Kurt Russell's sister. Well, I didn't know anything about Kurt Russell. I had no idea who he was. I came down on a like Christmas holiday, and I walk into this house, and it's like sprawling, big, giant house. Of course, it was a little ranch house out in Thousand Oaks, California, but to me, it was massive. had this big giant swimming pool, and here's this guy out there drinking a beer and wearing a pair of shorts, and it's like Tuesday, and I went, holy cow, what is this? I got to figure out how to do something like this. So it was eye-opening to me to know that there was something other than going to work every day from 9 to 5 and doing that.
And then how did you make your early inroads then? And acting isn't necessarily an obvious leap to take. Was
No,
it
but
his guide?
I tell you, one of the greatest ways to learn production is to be on a movie set and be an extra and pay attention. Most actors don't pay attention because they're not there to do that. But I was there to learn about the business and how it worked and who was doing what and what would be fitting for me. And obviously, I knew right off the bat I wasn't going to be in front of the camera. So, and I got through Kurt actually because he knew the people at Disney. Got an interview with the extras department, and I started working as an extra, so I could learn how to do, be an assistant director basically. And then I eventually got myself into the Directors Guild training program, and then it took off from there.
How did you end up on Harry and Walter Go to New York? That's your first second AD role that's credited here. How did that happen?
Well, it happened because of Jerry Ziesmer, who's a very famous first assistant director who did Apocalypse Now, and
Yeah, oh yeah.
wrote a book about his experiences. And through the training program, the Directors Guild training program, they assign you to shows, and you get a well-rounded education. My first production job was I did 22 episodes of The $6 Million Man. And then I did, like a long form deal. I did a Columbo, a long form, an hour and a half Columbo show. And then they put me on features.
Okay.
And my first feature was Battle of Midway. And my second one was Harry and Walter Go to New York. And that's where I was actually placed on that by the Directors Guild. And that's where I met Jerry Ziesmer. And that began this long relationship with, an iconic first assistant director.
Okay, well, which obviously you mentioned Apocalypse Now. What an experience that had to be for you.
It's
What
unbelievable.
was Everyone has stories. What's your story from Apocalypse Now?
Well, I think the one that's the one I like to tell the most because it's a clean one, but it's pretty funny. There's a lot of rumors about what was going on there. Most of it's untrue, but we were like Kurt's compound. We were in the jungle and we were there to make a movie, and it was just kind of crazy. First day day before Marlon's going to work, he comes onto the set of that big compound. He gets out of the car and he weighs like 900 pounds, and he's got this like Filipino not pajamas, but like I forget what they call them, but the big shirt that that you wear out. And he had this big flock of gray hair, and he went around introducing himself. Hey, I'm Marlon Brando. Everybody's going like, yeah, right. We already know that, Marlon. So the next day, I'm the second AD, so I was in charge of meeting him when his car shows up, and he gets out of his car. His head is completely shaved, and he's wearing black Vietnamese pajamas. And I'm like, holy cow. I went, Jared, you better get Francis over here right now, over the radio. He says, what's wrong? He says, I said, Marlon showed up. His hair's gone, and he's got on these black pajamas, and, he wants to talk to Francis. Okay. So Francis comes over. They chit-chat. They walk. They had a house. Marlon, we had a houseboat for Marlon and one for Francis down on a river, and it was about maybe 100-yard walk down this embankment down to the river. And so I was actually stationed on the top of the mountain, on the top of the hillside there, watching what was going on. I sat there the entire day, watching them go back and forth, and then there would be like nothing happening for a long time, and I'd report back, Jerry, nobody's moved there in 15 minutes, and then I'd see somebody walking back and forth. Anyway, the sun's going down, and we completely wrapped. The whole day was spent with Marlon and Francis in the houseboat. And so now the sun's almost completely gone, and they're marching up from the houseboat. And Francis says to me, he says, you know what he said to me? And I said, no, what did he say? He said, I don't think I should be seen or heard in the movie. And Francis goes, I'm paying this guy $1 million. He doesn't want to be seen or heard. Well, you take that from that point and you look at the end result and you kind of realize what the concept that he was going after was. And you really don't see much of Marlon Brando in the movie, and you don't really hear much from him. You hear a lot of voiceover.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was an interesting thing, especially just how shocking it was when he got out of that car. It was like, holy Toledo.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
In terms of Carpenter, you saw him on Elvis, which he at one point told me was a crazy production for him. And then you move into The Fog in 1980,
Yeah.
and you were first AD on that picture.
Hmm.
Do you have any stories from the making of The Fog?
Oh yeah, plenty. That was that for me. That he thinks that Elvis was interesting for him. It was a little bit interesting for me too because I had been working in features and now we're doing a TV movie, and of course, TV movies are shooting like 5 and 6 pages a day, and I've been used to shooting 1 or 2 pages a day. So it was, it was kind of tough getting our feet wet. And then I think for John, there was a access to a lot more than he'd been used to on like Halloween and things like that. So it was an interesting thing for him to have all like the equipment that he needed and the things that he wanted to do and the people ready to help him and all that stuff. And that was, that was difficult, I think, for him. The difficult thing for me on The Fog was I hadn't done a non-union movie ever. And now I'm out wrapping cable and driving motorhomes and doing all this stuff that I'd never done before, making movies, and I was having the time of my life doing all that. I just thought that was the coolest thing going, that I didn't have to, there weren't people doing those kinds of jobs. Everybody was doing everybody else's job all the time. It was fantastic.
Hmm. And had you seen, there were a few years between the two projects. How had you seen him grow as an on-set leader?
Well, he was an on-set leader from the get-go. John is one of those people that he knew exactly what he wanted to get, and he knew exactly how to get it. Now, did he need help from everybody? Yeah, of course he did. But he had a concept about where he wanted to put the camera, how many shots he wanted to get in a day, how to break down a scene. I mean, he was a total craftsman from the very beginning. So actually, for me, he didn't change that much from the beginning to the very end. He was that guy. He was on a mission all the time, and for somebody like me who likes to support a vision, it was a pleasant experience.
And you guys had actually on that one, in the end, were decided, I guess, to go back and shoot some additional footage, right?
Somebody asked me that question the other day, and I can't recall. I do remember we shot a shot of Adrian Barbeau laying on the floor of his garage with blood. That was done afterwards, but we didn't do anything substantial like a total reshoot. We may have done more than one shot, but that's one shot that I do remember that we did. But we didn't do an extensive. We didn't put a full crew together and do anything crazy like they do nowadays, or like we do nowadays.
Right. And then you moved in to Escape from New York with him.
Mm-hmm.
And on this one, now you're actually moving. You had at this point transitioned into the producer role as well. How did that transition happen for you on this picture?
Well, it happened because of Deborah Hill and John Carpenter, who saw in me a guy who was willing to do whatever had to be done to help make the movie. And they wanted a guy like that on their team, and they were gracious enough to offer me that. I didn't even ask for it, to be honest, and John offered me to get a producer credit on the next one and share it with Deborah, and Deborah was quite willing to do that. And we had separate roles, Deborah and myself. She was the creative producer, and I was the line producer, so I was the nuts and bolts of it, and Deborah was the creative part of it, and she did a lot of dealing with the studio and the money people and all that, and I was basically running the set and running the making of the movie.
John is pretty famous for on-set pranks. I know that he's always prided himself on that, and there's great stories from a number of different films of things that he did. Do you have any stories from these first couple of movies about him having fun on set with you guys?
That's funny that you'd say that, because I don't remember anything specifically that John had. Oh, well, I can now. I just remembered something. He was involved in. I was going through a midlife crisis on Christine, which is a movie we did a little bit later, and I had just bought a Porsche, and we were shooting in this place, and I was put my car cover on my Porsche every day so it wouldn't get run over, and it was out parked with the crew. Anyway, bottom line is we go outside to look at something, and there's this Caterpillar that's running right over my car. Well, it wasn't my car. They had taken a car cover that looked like mine and put it over another car, and this cat that we were using to move dirt around out in the parking lot is backing up over my car. Well, I was like, I turned around and the entire crew was laughing at me. Everybody thought it was really funny, and of course it was. Um, yeah, that was on Christine though. That wasn't on me.
He ac- he actually told me that story a long time ago. He told it at a convention, and he takes such pride in that prank.
Yeah,
He
it
just
was.
feels
They
like
they
it was
they
such
they
a big.
did it beautifully because they grabbed my keys and they, we're gonna fill your car up with gas. We're gonna wash it and fill it up for you. All that. So I give them my key. I didn't even think about it. So they moved my yeah. It was classic. I was out of my mind for about a minute and a half, and then I turned around and, there's 100 people staring at me and laughing. Yeah, it was pretty funny.
Well, Escape from New York was, talk about a challenging production. You guys had to have a destroyed city, and I understand that you actually found a rather unfortunate situation in the Midwest that proved ideal. How did you find the right place to shoot that film,
Well,
and
I
where
gotta
was it?
think. I think that the credit there should go to. There's two people really. One is Joe Alves, the production designer on that movie. We were trying to figure out a way to fake it somehow on the back lot and all that because we didn't really feel, neither John or myself felt like we could be able to pull something off on a location because we didn't think we had the money to do anything like that. And Joe Alves was insistent on it, and our associate producer and location manager Barry Bernardi, very, very close friend of both mine and John's, was tasked with finding a place where we could shoot the movie. Well, he found it. He found it in St. Louis, and there was had a firestorm gone through there about 3 years before we were there, and there was a whole 2.5, 3 block area of 2-story buildings that were completely gutted and burnt out. So we started with that, and then we just went through every dump we could find and just brought every piece of garbage that you can see on the street. Washing machines and refrigerators and all that kind of stuff, and filled it. And then we bought this airplane for dirt cheap from some graveyard somewhere in Arizona, and there we put that right in the middle of this big. I guess it was like a central, like a central park in that area. Laid that out on the ground and put it on fire, and so yeah, it was really it was one of the coolest things ever, I think, because it looks like at the end of the day that we were in New York City. I don't I
Yeah.
mean now it doesn't hold up 100%, but it holds up pretty good. And when you think about there's no digital effects in it, you go, holy Toledo, how'd they do that?
Yeah. That's really incredible what you guys managed to do on that, and that's a hallmark of all of John's films, really.
Yeah,
And
yeah. He just
there's
knows how to do stuff, And I can
yeah,
remember there's a shot in that movie. James Cameron was the director of photography for the visual effects unit, which was $350,000 at budget. New World Visual Effects down in Venice somewhere. And there's a shot in that movie. It's a POV of the glider that lands on the rooftop. And what
yeah.
it is, it's a cutout photo of New York, black and white photo of New York City, just pasted up on the stage wall. The stage wall is just painted black, just black paint, and a camera hung up from a rope, and James Cameron on a ladder, letting go of the camera, and it just swoops down into that black and white photograph. And I swear to God, it looks so cool. Works great.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you guys were really moving through these films as a unit at this point, because 1 year later, The Thing was the next project, and Halloween was revolutionary for the genre and for independent cinema. And The Thing was really the game changer when it came to effects films. 1982, it wrote the book, and Rob teams worked in that, everyone as a unit. You were first AD on that. You were an associate producer and technically in the film. I would love to hear about your stories from being up there in the tundra and shooting that, because talk about location selling a film. My goodness, it's a masterpiece.
Well, there's two different locations there. One is the Juneau ice field. We shot that in the summertime, and that's all the stuff where the helicopter's chasing the dog.
Hmm.
The rest of it is outside of British Columbia, outside of Stewart, British Columbia, and it's off of a copper mine road that goes up into the mountains. And we built a spur off of that, right next to a glacier there. There's a lot of different stories about how that went wrong. A couple of which are, the ore cars are going up and ore trucks are going up and down the mountain, and here's us going up and down the mountain too. So it's like you could hear the radio chatter. It was like CB radio, Universal 1 north at mile 15, and then you'd hear K55 south at mile 16, and you're going, oh shit, because they have the right of way and they're full of ore. So this guy's coming on mile 16 and he's doing like 30 miles an hour down the mountain, and we're in this a little van, and our guy has to find a place to pull over because he doesn't have the right of way at that point, and then the ore truck goes by. So there's a lot of stories about guys panicking and almost going off the road, and I think Kurt's got a pretty good story about one of those events. And then all the interiors were on a soundstage in Los Angeles in the heat of the summer, 100 degrees outside, and we've got the soundstage cooled down to 42 degrees because that's the optimum breath, whatever. And burlap bags hanging from the ceiling with, dripping water on them and all that. Yeah, it's kind of old school filmmaking, but man, does it work great.
Yeah, it's a hybrid of so many different elements too, combining some miniature work at some points with all those great practical effects that were on set.
Well, I
Just
think
really outstanding.
the thing that's really outstanding about that movie, when you think back on it, is there's absolutely no CGI in it at all. Those are all practical effects, and it's really difficult to imagine sort of some of the stuff we went through to make that happen. For instance, one of the best shots or sequences I know in that for me is when James Halloran he gets his or Charles Halloran, sorry, where the monster comes out of his stomach, and the monster bites the arms off of Richard Dicer. Well,
Right.
you can imagine what that might be like. What it was Charles Halloran underneath a table was just his head showing, and the rest of his body was all phony, makeup effects, and that would open and close. And then the guy on top was this really cool guy who had an industrial accident about 5 years ago in a sheet metal factory and lost both his arms at the elbow. So it was like one of those things. He had a mask on. He's got his hands near the opening. The thing opens up. I mean, it's just a cool thing. Now, it took us like 2 or 3 hours in the morning to set that up, and everybody's like, "Oh man, this is taking too long." All that you're dealing with. But in the end, it looked really cool. And then to have that head walking across the floor was just like way too much. There was a lot of stuff in there that I don't know how we did it actually, and I was there. It's pretty amazing. Rob Bottin was, phenomenal.
Yeah. And what I love, there's that great documentary that came out. I think it was pulled off a Laserdisc from many years ago that includes interviews with a bunch of people from the picture, including Rob. And his enthusiasm talking about the film, even at that point, was so infectious. And he has since kind of retreated to the woods. He's doing his own thing and moved away from the business. And he's just absent from the scene. And it's such a sad thing because of the power and artistry that he arrived with on every picture he was a part of. It's just really outstanding.
Yeah, he was. Rob was really cool. I didn't know that he got out of the business. I just haven't run into him for a long time. But yeah, Rob, his enthusiasm was infectious, and at the time, I can say that we were going, God damn, this is bullshit. Why is this taking so long? Rob, what's going on? Well, this isn't going to be ready. Why are we doing this now? Why can't we? All that dialogue that you hear on a movie set all the time. I cursed him, constantly during the photography and even afterwards, because we did a lot of stuff, isolated effects, not in production. That was all in post-production. So. Yeah, we had some miniature sets, and we built some corners of sets and things like that, at the end. But, the proof was in the pudding. It's just outstanding work. There's no question about it, no matter how difficult it was to get it.
And that film came out during the same summer as a certain other alien film.
Yeah.
And so what do you remember about the reception of the movie and how it was how it was treated at the cinema.
I don't recall anything about the reception of the movie. What I recall is the day that um, the studio called John and myself up to the tower. We were prepping the next movie, Firestarter, which eventually got made, but not by us. And I can hear it right now. We realize the obligation we have to you both, but we've decided not to proceed with the movie. And I mean, that was a gut shot that went right through us, and we didn't say anything to each other for I don't know, probably a half an hour. Walked out of the room, got into an elevator, went back to our offices, and said, "What just happened?" Um, and of course, what happened was the thing didn't come out and do very well, and so everybody lost confidence in John, which is the biggest mistake they could have ever made, and they decided
Right.
not to go with the next movie, uh, which was really unfortunate. But I don't remember, like the box office and all that kind of stuff. I just remember that part of that ugly scenario.
Yeah, I think that's the outstanding result was it's shocking, that this film of all of them wouldn't have succeeded in terms of financial side of things. But then more so, what a blow to you guys, and especially to John, losing the studio deal
Oh yeah,
as a result of this. And now this movie is universally revered and really a benchmark in the genre. And but it set John on a path that led him to Christine,
yeah.
which which was the year later. And I've ended up writing a number of articles for various magazines on the film and on it's such an interesting project for so many reasons with all the vehicles. And I would like to know about you're moving away from this disappointment of losing the studio deal and coming off of the lack of confidence that some had in the thing. What what was it like moving into Christine at this point? You're a co-producer, you're a first AD on this one. Can you tell me about this moment in you guys, your circle and the production of the film?
Well, I think what at the time it was okay. We're back doing what we want to do, guys. I think that some of the stuff that happened on that movie, and I wasn't really privy to a lot of the grief that John had to go through in terms of editing it the way they wanted to see it, and all that sort of stuff that was going on that I wasn't
Mhm.
really privy to. But he struggled with the whole studio system, and I think when we started Christine, it was like, okay, we're back in it, guys. Here's what we're going to do. It's going to be great. And by the way, it was. It was back to Escape from New York time. We were making chicken salad out of chicken shit every day, and just having fun doing it. It was like we were having a lot of fun making those movies. The stuff that wasn't fun was when we got involved in a studio and they wanted this and they wanted that and we can't do this and we can't do that. And then, generally speaking, on those movies, pretty much had carte blanche. John had final cut, and we were just out there doing it. That
Yeah.
was great.
What memories do you have from that shoot,
Um,
Christine?
well, the one memory is the one I just relayed about my car, because that was out at that. Well,
Right.
what I remember about that was the tremendous amount of ingenuity it took to, the beginning of that movie is an assembly line of these cars. Well, this is I believe it's 1983, and this is a 1957 Plymouth Fury, and for somebody to be able to get into the DMV and find out how many people actually have. Apparently, a Fury and a Belvedere were almost identical. So we had the names and addresses of everybody in California who had a 57 Fury or a 57 Belvedere. And we had people from our transportation department going out and trying to get these people to allow us to either use their car or let us buy their car. And we bastardized all those cars into this assembly line. And it's pretty amazing when you think about what we did for the amount of money that we spent on it. It's pretty amazing. Nowadays, I don't know what you'd do. You'd probably CG all the goddamn cars. You'd make one and you'd CG them all, and then God knows what you're gonna do. But That kind of stuff back in the day was what was all about. Was how are we going to pull this off? We don't have any money. We do have a little money, but how are we going to do it? And what's going to be the best way to do it? And yeah, John's a craftsman, like I said before. So a lot of it is about where he puts the camera and what is it saying to you, and that. Because there's a lot of things that you think you saw in the thing that you didn't see. And there's a lot of things you think you know about Christine the car that you don't know. It's that sort of thing. He's a master at that. And he's a master of getting a scare when he wants it. And, it was that kind of fun stuff that we were doing.
It's also fitting that losing Firestarter, which was a Stephen King book, of course,
Mhm.
then he moves right into another Stephen King project
Right.
with Christine, which which uh which is such a now another revolutionary film. And within the world of the car circuit, I've gone to I don't know how many car shows with a buddy of mine who owns one of the cars from the movie.
Really?
And
Wow.
yeah, people just lose their minds
Yeah.
over this film, and it became a real important thing. And on to we talked earlier about the challenge of the schedule for television shooting, for example,
Mm-hmm.
versus cinema.
Mm-hmm.
What he has told me was the most challenging shoot he ever had was Starman in 1984,
Yeah.
because you guys were all over the country. Can you talk about shooting this movie?
Yeah, that actually was what they call a road movie. It was really a road movie. We shot in Las Vegas. We shot in Arizona. We shot in, mostly a lot of it in Tennessee, and I think a little bit in Kentucky. Uh, but there again, I have a memory of that shoot that will last forever, and we had locked off I-15. Okay, I-15 running through Vegas. We're outside of Vegas, and we have the entire freeway to ourselves, and they're routing traffic on and off between two exits. And I can remember, we're staging all the cars and all that because it's supposed to be a big roadblock and this and that. And I can remember standing on the back of the insert car and looking at all of this stuff and all of these people and all this equipment and the cops that were, all that. And I just thought, wow, this is the greatest business on the planet, and we're in the greatest town doing it. How can it get any better than this? And I just have that memory on the top of that insert car on that day. Um, and of course, Jeff was fantastic. What a great guy he was, and Karen, and because we were staying in Holiday Inns and stuff like that. It wasn't the luxurious way to go, except for Vegas. Um, but yeah, it was cool.
How had your role evolved? Because you went from co-producer, now you're just producer on this one and first AD again. But had your role evolved within the camp at this point too?
No, I think my role was always the same, um, which was getting the movie made, and I was not. John was the one who was taking the brunt of the creative problems that all movies have, where the people with the money want this and they want that, and all those sort of struggles that directors go through. Uh, what made it easy for both of us was the fact that John trusted me and I trusted him, so we didn't have a problem trying to get the movie done within the constraints of what we were given in terms of money. Our movies always came in on budget, or maybe a little under, or maybe just a tad over, or any of that. It was right around the budget all the time, and it was all due to John's planning and me being able to facilitate that plan, throughout all those movies. So my role really didn't change once. Once I became, getting the full producer credit.
Right.
But I was, always there in terms of all the problems that you have with the cast and things like that. So in that regard, yeah, I was helpful.
So this brings us to the picture at hand today, talking about Big Trouble in Little China.
Mm.
Another one that is really become a classic. I'd like to hear first about how this project first came on your radar and when the ball got rolling on it.
Well, it came on the radar as everything that happened back in those days through John. Um, and it was W.D. Richter had written this really funny script, and John loved it, and we all started, getting really excited about it, and we were given a little bit more money than we'd had in the past, and the thing that I remember about the movie most was the disappointment when the movie came out. It was another one of those things where we opened up against, you know, I think it was Aliens, and then that movie just went through the roof, and so Fox saw that coming and sort of, started spreading the money toward that in terms of the prints and ads, and we got less of it, and so the movie came out. It didn't have a lot of support from the studio, um, and to be honest with you, it was another one of those slaps in faces for John. And the movie, when it came out, was completely misunderstood. Kurt was being accused of trying to be Clint Eastwood and all that shit. And now, after all that, I mean, all the people that I work with now, and I think one of the reasons is because I think they sold it to cable for like $2, because every kid that's on every set that I'm on now, this is one of their favorite movies because they've all seen it, and
Yeah.
it's sort of like a classic now.
It really is, and I think it's such a singular entity. It's not like anything else. It's such a hybrid of a lot of different genres, and it seems to approach each one with sincerity,
Mm.
and it's equal parts funny as it is, intense, and the action is second to none. I mean, it really is such a hybrid of so many different elements that are all successful.
Uh,
Originally, this was written actually as a Western. Were you privy to the early Goldman and Weinstein script
no,
about?
no, I wasn't.
Okay.
I knew of it, but I hadn't read it. Yeah, I
Yeah, it
know.
was
I
originally,
I knew of it. Yeah.
yeah, and then that's when they brought in, I guess the studio brought in W.D. Richter, who is, for those who aren't aware, the Buckaroo Banzai. He
Yeah.
directed Buckaroo Banzai as well, and he did a real big doctoring of the script, and then John did further,
Yeah.
uh, work on it too. And at the same time, there was a film starring Eddie Murphy that was in production called The Golden Child
Mm-hmm.
that had, I guess, some similar elements and things. And is that true that you guys were kind of trying to race them to the finish line to get yours out first?
I don't recall that at all. I know of the movie, but I don't recall us trying to beat them out. Um, we were on a production schedule from the get go, and I didn't really feel that sense of, okay, we got to get this done because this other movie's coming out. It could have been there. I don't know. I just don't recall it at all.
Yeah, John's mentioned that in the past, and I was just curious from your end of things if you'd run into any kind of pressure in that regard. What was it like leading up to this? And because of these elements that are coming together here, I know that there was at least 1 week of rehearsal beforehand, mostly with the martial arts stuff. What was the build up to the film like in pre-production, like on Big Trouble?
Well, I think the most important thing for John was to make the martial arts part of it as real as he could. And we went, we actually did a casting session in New York for these three, rain and lightning and thunder. And I got to tell you something. There was this guy, the guy who plays Thunder, just completely came in and kind of just wiped everybody out. He was so on the money and so scary and so it's like, oh Jesus. Until I had seen that guy, I didn't realize how intense and how focused and how what a art form the whole martial arts thing is. But this guy was doing a kung fu form that was it just had everybody's jaw on the floor, and so it all started with that. Once we saw that, then it became even more important to John that all these people are the right people to do this, and we got to get the right stunt people, and we have to, all of that. And we want to be as true as we can to the martial arts form, and try to be, mindful of the fact that a lot of people just take it for granted, but we wanted to make it as real as possible.
The person that you're talking about is Carter Wong,
Yeah.
who and he is a martial arts legend. He's been doing stuff since the 70s and is really a master, still considered a master, and is very celebrated. And I know that it was, in terms of the martial arts coordinator, was James Liu on this picture, putting all these different martial arts folks and stunt people together to make it happen. That had to be a real intense and huge undertaking for everybody.
Yeah, it definitely was because trying to find Hollywood stuntmen who are going to know this sort of art was difficult. And Jeff Imada was the stunt coordinator on the movie, and Jeff was responsible for getting those people. The cast was something that we actually through with James and also another fellow, Jim Lau, who knew a lot about the martial arts business. That's how we got the main characters in the movie was that. But the stunt people in the movie mostly came from Jeff Imada and James Liu, because James Liu had been working in the business for a while. So, yeah, it was a big undertaking, and they really pulled it off. It looks fantastic.
And I read that Kurt was initially a little bit reluctant about taking the role of Jack Burton. What do you recall about him being cast as this, and do you remember anyone else having been considered for the role?
No, I don't remember anybody being considered for it other than Kurt, and I don't remember Kurt's reluctance. I don't know why he would have not wanted to do it. Maybe for the reason that actually the way it came out, which is the way it ended up, which is he got criticized big time for because it didn't play campy like it was supposed to in the beginning when it opened. So I think maybe he was leery of that, and maybe rightfully so, was a little leery of doing it. But in the end, as you can see, it works great, and that the way you see it now is the way it was intended, and it was misunderstood when it came out.
He said eventually he was attracted to the role because he was intrigued by the idea of a hero with faults. And I think that's one of the things that makes Jack Burton special and so unique in the pantheon of heroes, is that in this movie he at one point knocks himself out when he shoots the gun into the ceiling
Yeah,
and
right,
the concrete falls on his head. I mean, he's a clumsy accidental hero, but really in a lot of ways it's Dennis Dunn
right.
who's the lead and sort of the star of the film as Wang Chi.
Mm-hmm.
What do you remember about Dennis?
Dennis was fantastic. He was a young kid. He was willing to do anything. He knew martial arts really well. He did have to have a lot of lessons. He didn't know it as well as everybody else did, of course. Um, but Dennis was. Everybody on that movie was all in. Victor Huang was, one of those guys too that was all over it. And really enjoyed themselves and enjoyed, being involved in a movie about the whole martial arts and the underground Chinese San Francisco part of the whole thing, and because it's part of their culture. They've grown up with that, and it was fun being around all those guys and how much fun they were having. And Dennis was fantastic.
Yeah, John had, I guess, seen him in Year of the Dragon and been intrigued by his performance in that. And then, of course, he went on to Dennis went on to be in Prince of Darkness.
Mm,
So it certainly wasn't the last time that they worked together.
no,
Another one in the cast here, another icon is James Hong
right.
as Lo Pan.
Mm-hmm.
What a presence. What a presence.
Yeah,
And what a huge character. What do you remember about James, who had also been in the business many, many years by this point and was really a revered actor?
right. Well, what I remember about James is how intense he was about playing the role the way he plays it. Uh, Almost to a fault. He wanted things to be, especially his makeup and stuff. He's very particular about his makeup. He was very particular about, when he was going to be on the set, and because he wanted to be totally prepared when he got there. And um, I don't want to use the term pain in the ass, but he was a pain in the ass because of all that, which is understandable because that's the role. That's the role he had to play, and he played it brilliantly. And so there you have it. I mean, sometimes these things are hard to get on the screen. But in the end, obviously, it's all worth it. You know what you have to go through to get it done.
Yeah. What about Kim Cattrall as
She was
Gracie, which is a
fantastic.
role that I guess John had actually expanded from the original script. How was Kim on the film?
She was fantastic. I think it was one. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but it was one of her first movies. I think she was only 18 years old at the time. Um, and again, she was one that was totally all in. She was having such a great time and was totally into her role. And you know, she liked to hang out on the set because that was kind of fun for her. And you know, it was a pretty big happy family all in. You know, we were having a good time making the movie, and it was a little bit stressful because we were, you know, we had a little bit more money than we'd had in the past, and we didn't want to screw that up. And um, you know, we built this big set on the lot, so we wanted to take advantage of that. And so there were certain elements that, you know, we were all kind of a little bit uptight about. But in general, we were having the time of our lives, you know.
It was mostly shot it was at Fox Studios
Yeah.
on the stages there, but there was some things that were shot in San Francisco too, right?
Well, yeah. There's the whole the thing with the bus and you know, driving through Chinatown. The exterior stuff was all up there. But in fact, are you watching the same thing I'm watching right now? This whole scene that we're watching was done in a abandoned furniture factory down in downtown L.A. So there was a lot of it. I'm noticing there's a lot of it in that, and there was a lot on the soundstage at Fox. Not much in
So
San
you guys are
Francisco, actually. Just the stuff in exterior Chinatown.
right. That makes sense. That makes sense. So what you mentioned something earlier that I would like to ask about because this movie does touch so closely. It really leans on the some cultural elements. Was there ever any concern about any of the elements that you guys had in the film, or and making sure to handle these things properly so it would be culturally sensitive? How did you guys approach that side of it?
There was a lot of concern about that. I must say. We wanted to make sure that we you know portrayed it as it was and not you know put any kind of a dark blanket over any of it, and we wanted to make sure we were true to it. So there's you know that's James Liu and Jim Lau making sure that were being true to that sort of story, and we were very concerned about it. We didn't want to offend anybody in the community. Uh, and I don't think we did because at the end of the day, we got a couple of awards from the Chinese community and martial arts people, and you know I think we did it justice. But yes, the truth is we were very aware of it.
Yeah, that's Carter Wong right now you're seeing on screen holding
Yeah,
him up.
this guy is phenomenal. He doesn't speak English very well. Maybe he does by now, but sweetest guy on the planet. But boy, when he turns into that, you just don't want to be anywhere near him. He's just like it explodes out of him. It's crazy.
Were there any close calls during the production? Was there anything any moments of concern as a result of all of the stunt work that had to be done?
No, actually, it was all pretty safe. You know, there's always that when you're doing hand-to-hand combat and stuff like that. There's always something could, you know, somebody could get dinged a little bit. But you know, those were all stunt people. We didn't do anything with extras and any of that stuff. So they were all aware that was their job. And so, no, there wasn't. And then there's you know the stuff where they're on wires and they're flying around. That's all pretty controlled stuff too. So it wasn't. You know, it wasn't crazy. No, we weren't doing anything outside the box. Basically,
Sure.
we were staying within the lines.
Yeah, yeah. One person that was a part of the team, and this ended up being the last collaboration with John, was the cinematographer Dean Cundy.
Hmm.
And Dean really, in many ways, established like his partnership with John is a textbook for anyone interested in moving into the realm of cinema. And Dean was such a crucial element to what a lot of people would sort of call the John Carpenter look. But unfortunately, this was the last collaboration that he had with John. What do you remember about Dean and how he worked with John on set?
I remember Dean very fondly. In fact, I think it's probably been a year or so since I've spoken to him, but I run into him occasionally, and his son works in video, so I run into him occasionally. Uh, Dean, I don't know how to say it, but the guy's a total genius. I mean, he used to do things that I don't even know how he ended up doing it, but he was a master of lighting with nothing. And nowadays you can do it with all these digital cameras, but we're talking about back in the day. This is 85 or 86, and we didn't. It was very difficult, and we're doing stuff in sometimes pretty low light situations, and especially on Escape from New York. I mean, Dean. I mean, he pulled that off big time. The Fog. Those kinds of movies. Dean just killed it, and Dean's the sweetest guy on the planet. I don't know if you've ever had the opportunity to interview him, but man, what a guy! And he and John just clicked all the time. It's great.
I have, yeah, and he's really generous with his time with people too, and you can just he that passion we talked about with Rob Bottin. It's the same thing with Dean
Mm.
when he gets to talking about film, and it's so evident that it is his heart's full of it, and it's really clear on screen too. And what a lot of fans mourn is that breaking of that partnership after this film. Do you have any idea why there was a transition away from them working together?
Well, I think it's just one of those things. We were all together for such a long time, and it was sort of like time to move on. I mean, we all at some point start taking a little bit advantage of things. I don't can't think of anything specific, but um, maybe we didn't work as hard because it was too easy for us, and maybe it was time for somebody to come up with a new idea. Maybe John creatively just wanted to surround himself with a new team just because.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know. Those things are really, it's hard to say. I can't think of anything specific why it didn't happen. Other than, after you've done it a while, then you start to realize, there are other people that do all these jobs, and some of them do them equally as well, and some of them are just as nice as the people you're working with, and so on and so forth. And sometimes maybe it's worth making a little bit of a change, and maybe it can make your life a little easier and better.
Yeah. I think that the reason that it's still discussed so much is because John really did seem to build a bit of a family around himself. That included you
Yeah, yeah.
from the beginning, and carrying a lot of the folks from Halloween forward, even back to Dark Star
Hmm.
forward through so many projects. And so this really was a big turning point in his career around 86, when he was moving into new realms with what he was creating. And so it's an interesting transition period. I'm
Well, a
curious.
lot of it, I can tell you, a lot of it had to do with the fact that this was the last studio film that John did, except for he came back to do, I think it was Invisible Man at Warner Brothers. But
Right.
after
Which he said
Big
was
Trouble,
a nightmare.
yeah, I'm sure he thought it was a nightmare. But after Big Trouble in Little China, John had his fill of the whole studio system. And when I don't know if John's ever relayed this story, but we're showing the movie to the studio, and we're about ready to hit the final dubbing stage in about 2 weeks, and um, the one of the guys, one of the head honchos, I don't want to say anybody's name here, but walks out to go to the bathroom, comes back, and almost every question that happened after that was, well, why did this happen? Why did that happen? And well, you didn't miss the part where that kind of thing. And there was a lot of notes that were given, and sort of now the work begins comes out of this guy's mouth, and it's like, hang on a minute now, we've broken our ass to get to this point. We like the movie, and what the fuck are you think you're doing coming in here and telling us what. So it was like,
Right.
okay, I've had enough of this shit. This is John. I'm not doing this. Fuck this. I'm not doing it. So that's when the whole Shep Gordon, Andre Blay, Prince of Darkness, and They Live, and there were supposed to be four of them. It only ended up being two, but John wanted to go back to those movies were made for like $3 million, and instead of 25 million, and that was back to the old school way of doing movies, and that's the way John preferred it. And then he went
Yeah.
back and did another studio movie, and I think he had a really rough time.
He did.
Yeah.
He shared that with me once about working with Chevy Chase
Well,
and how that film almost drove him out of film, period.
yeah.
Like he was ready to completely walk away from the craft after all he had been through with that experience.
Well,
It's
you know,
really
the thing is that surprises me because John always could figure out a way to go back and do it like the old days. You know, for him to say that it drove him out would almost drove him out of the business. That's kind of strange. I didn't realize that because he always knows that he can go make a movie somewhere somehow. You know, for a little bit of money, and it's probably going to be successful, and because he just has a knack for it. You know, he's a craftsman. He's a genius director, and the fact that he has a hard time working with people who are trying to tell him what to do all the time. You know, there's a lot of people like that. Trust me. But very few people have had final cut on movies, and you know, when John has those little ones, he does what he wants, and that's appealing to him. And I can see why, you know, after a while, you don't want to listen to this crap anymore.
you talk about him being all in, and he really is. And I touched on the score being so important to this film. They are for all of his movies, and I'm not sure if you're aware, but he's in the last several years released several albums
Yeah,
that have done
he
really,
goes on the
really well.
road
And
apparently.
he does.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's fantastic. You know, because there's a you know the Isaac Hayes driving down the street with that Cadillac in Escape from New York is like one of the most classic film cues of all times.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, John's got some iconic stuff, and I can see where people, you know, I can tell a score from him in after 2 bars because you know I've been around it so much. But yeah, he loves his music and he's really good at it.
And his son Cody too now is doing his own music, and they're partnering up on a lot of stuff, which is really awesome,
That's
and
really
playing
cool.
live together. And the live show is incredible. But he also was instrumental in creating, unbeknownst to him, a whole subgenre of music called synthwave. And a lot of these bands really idolize him and reference the music that he did for all these movies as the, I guess you'd say, sort of the mold that everything that they're doing is leaning on or
Right.
based off of. So he's been really instrumental, not just in cinema, but in music as well.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know that about him performing live with Cody, but that's cool.
Yeah,
And
yeah, it's a whole production where
yeah,
he has
and the
clip.
fact that his music is like, you know, that there's other generations that are, you know, that are responding to it is really cool. I'm really happy for him. That's really neat.
Yeah, yeah. It is when you talked about losing the studio deal and then him moving into doing some more independent films and then a couple that are a little larger budget, which would be Starman and Big Trouble. Since then, you guys moved from Big Trouble into Prince of Darkness and then They Live, which are both celebrated now. And I mean, you talk about music being important. Prince of
Yeah,
Darkness,
right,
that film has a pulse,
right.
and that's John's score, wall to wall. It's incredible.
Yeah.
But why do you think studios consider him a risk? Do you think they do, or do you think it's a conscious effort for him just to steer clear of them?
I think it's a conscious effort for him to steer clear. I don't think anybody thinks that John Carpenter is a risk, especially at those prices. You know, I mean, give
Yeah.
John $10 million or $15 million, and he's going to come up with something that's going to make money. I believe that. But
Yeah.
you got to give him the $15 million and walk away from it. A lot of people can't do that, and that's where the whole rub is in the business, is that the people who have the money want some say-so in what it is to be, because they all think they're creative geniuses also, and they have a better way of doing it, and they have a better story to tell than the one you're trying to make with John Carpenter. So this is something that happens all the time. If you can find somebody to throw John $15 million and just take, you know, a percentage and shut up and walk away, then you're going to be okay. But you know, that's tough to find somebody like that.
You've not just worked with one, what I consider to be a film genius, in John. You've also had you've had a relationship with Tim Burton as well.
Yeah.
Would you say that John and Tim are similar in how thorough their vision is of what they want to create?
No, I would say they're pretty much opposite. John has it in his head and knows what it's going to be and knows pretty much how to get there. Tim has no idea. I mean, he has a general idea about what he wants, but he doesn't specifically know how to approach getting there and what what's right and what's wrong and what color works and what doesn't and sort of stuff like that. It's a lot of trial and error in terms of props and wardrobe and sort of all that kind of stuff. Whereas John's very specific about all that. So they're different in terms of that, but in terms of wavering from the vision, no, they're both the same in that regard. I mean, they both are committed to what they're doing and work incredibly hard doing it.
Well, you can tell a Tim Burton film the minute you hit play.
Yeah.
You can tell a John Carpenter film the minute you hit play. They have such distinctive styles with
Mm-hmm.
what they do. That's why I was wondering about that. And did you enjoy the time you were working with Tim?
Oh yeah, are you kidding? That was fantastic. And, and a lot of reason for that too is the music in Tim's movies is Danny Elfman, and that sort of
Yeah,
like tips you off in the beginning what it's going to be like. I mean, the first one I did was Batman Returns, which was the one with Danny DeVito and Michelle Pfeiffer back in
best Batman movie.
yeah
Yeah.
um, yeah that was Cobblepot and all that. That was cool. Um, And then there's another story. It's same story. I don't know why I'm involved in all these. Maybe somebody can make the connection. But how about Mars Attacks opening against Independence Day? I mean, that's
Yeah.
bullshit. Right here we are. And we're making a funny little cute quirky movie about Martians. And Roland Emmerich's blowing up the White House and taking all the audience. So there's another movie that I worked on that just didn't perform, not because it wasn't a good movie, but because it opened up against a monster. The Thing against the E.T., Big Trouble in Little China against aliens, and Mars Attacks against Independence Day, and hey, who loses? Us.
Yeah.
But we
Yeah.
all survived in the business. We all went on to make other movies, so it's not like the end of the world. But at the same time, it doesn't seem fair. And I hope there's no connection about how we did our jobs and the fact that it didn't perform. I don't think so.
Well, of Big Trouble, John said once, he's like, how many American martial arts movies like this can you think of being made? And he said, and then it just happens that this golden child's being shot at the same time as ours. And so it's just this weird accident. Same thing with the thing in
Yeah.
ET. Like there's no way to know. There's no way
No.
to forecast that. But the strange thing is, ET is a cultural presence, right? I
Yeah.
mean, obviously, and an international hit. But when you the ripples around films like The Thing and Big Trouble, where E.T. started big and has just sort of been a constant since, sort of an accepted mega hit
Mm-hmm.
type situation. The ripples around John's films seem to get bigger with time.
Yeah. Me
Like
too.
their impact and their voice grows over time, and they find their audience afterwards. And you mentioned with this movie here, Big Trouble, that it did not do well at the box office for whatever reason, but here everybody knows it. When did you start to figure out that this movie, speaking specifically of Big Trouble, that this movie was bigger than what it was, sort of bigger than its performance? When did you start to know that there was really something special
Well,
happening
I
with it?
sort I sort of knew it in the very beginning of it because we thought we were making the movie that now is people are reacting to. We
Mm.
didn't think for a second that we were making that other movie that people didn't like and didn't perform and nobody went to see. They thought it was bullshit. They thought Kurt was, like I said before, trying to do something that, he wasn't. Whatever we got creamed for, we didn't for 1 minute think that that's what was going to happen to us. We thought we were making the movie that you see, which is this really fun a look at San Francisco martial arts back in the day and all the weird stuff that happened. So, anyway, it is what it is. And now it's kind of fun because, like I said, on every movie set I'm on now, the young kids want to know about Big Trouble. Oh, that's my favorite movie. That and The Thing are the two I get the most asked about.
Yeah, absolutely. So after Big Trouble, and we'll return to some more elements of this as we move into the next reel here too. You were still working with John. So Prince of Darkness is one you shot that at that church, which anyone can go visit downtown LA
Yeah.
and see that church. For one, at least the exterior is there for the location. What do you remember about the production for Prince of Darkness? I know I've talked to Alice Cooper about that experience and how much fun he had there. What was Prince of Darkness like for you guys?
Well, again, we're going back to our roots, and so we were back to having fun, and we're back to, like I said, making chicken salad out of chicken shit every day. And for me, Donald Pleasance is a fantastic actor and a lot of fun to be around. And it was kind of a reunion from Escape from New York, and I got to meet Alice Cooper, which was a thrill of a lifetime. And the one thing I remember about that was when we were talking about a tarantula spider, and this guy, we called him the Bug Man. It was the guy, an entomologist, I think that's what the term is, but the guy that knows all about bugs and things. Because we were talking about the beetles, that scene where the guy turns into beetles and all that.
Yep.
And
Yep.
he takes this tarantula out of this box by hand and puts it on his sweater, and it starts crawling up toward his face. He says, as you'll notice, if you turn it sideways, it always wants to crawl up. So if you want it to crawl over a book, you got to put it. And by then, I'm already out in the hallway. There's no way I'm going to stick around for that. So, it was those kinds of things when you start making, when you're into movies and you read a scene and you go, how are we going to do that? How is that going to work? And all that. And of course, John always had the answer. Well, we'll do an insert here, and we'll do this over there, and then we'll do this. But yeah, I remember a lot about the Bug Man on that movie, and the Beatles, and those nights at outside that. And also, we had a set. We built a set that was the interior of the church, as I recall, was up in Santa Clarita somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
We built the interior of the set there that had the lava lamp, as people affectionately refer to it.
Yeah. And then They Live was a year later. I mean, you talk about this run of films that are also revered. Once Halloween came out, I mean, really once The Fog landed, it didn't slow down. 80, 81, 82, 3, 4, 5,
Mm-hmm.
6, 7, and then into 88 with They Live. Here, Roddy Piper, which I'm not sure if did John ever tell you the story of how he ended up having Alice Cooper in Prince of Darkness?
No, I don't think so. Maybe.
John,
Remind me.
here's not a lot of people know that John is actually a big pro wrestling fan.
I knew that. Yeah.
And he was at WrestleMania 3 and he was backstage meeting some of the wrestlers and things like that. And Alice Cooper was there because Alice was appearing on the pay-per-view with Jake the Snake Roberts. Alice was going
Uh-huh.
to be coming to the ring because of the snake connection. And they got to talking, and John uh, got to see Alice live afterwards, and then this big discussion got brought up about a gag that Alice had in his show with an impalement.
Right.
And John's like, "Oh, we would love to use that in this movie. Would you like to come down and like play a role in this thing? And maybe we
That's
can
it.
include that."
Yeah.
And that's the whole bicycle gag that happens when the guy gets impaled on the bicycle. That's what led to Alice being in the movie.
Wow. I always assumed, and I'm sure that I don't believe I've heard that story before, but Shep Gordon was Alice Cooper's manager, and that he was one of the producers on the movie. And I always thought that that's how the connection. I didn't realize that John had met Alice backstage at WrestleMania, but that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and it's really funny if you go to John's office, which is just a couple streets away from where he shot Halloween
Right.
and the Christine locations and things. On the shelf in his office, when I was writing for Fangoria, we did a Legends issue all about John. And he and I had like a real long career retrospective discussion for it. And we also, he gave us access to let me come in with a photographer and shoot his office.
Mm.
And one of the neatest things in that office, if you look in his bookshelf, is he has an autographed Roddy Piper GI Joe figure, and he has it displayed like a fanboy
Right,
because he so loved Piper.
right,
So it makes sense on They Live. John is working with his heroes.
right.
Piper, who I did a panel with him, an interview panel just a few months before he passed away, unfortunately, and he talked about like what a hero Carpenter was for him. What was They Live like for you? Here again, first AD, producer. You also played a little bit of a role in it.
Yeah.
What are your memories from They Live?
I my first the first memory that I have of They Live was when John handed me the script, and I'm reading the script. I'm reading the script, and then I come to this point where it says, "And they fight," and there's nothing written on the page, and then I turn the page. It's blank page again, blank page again, blank page again. 5 blank pages, and then the script takes on and then carries on. And I said, John, where's the fight? He said, I don't have it yet. I just wanted you to know, and I want you to be prepared for it, that we're going to do a huge, long fight. And I didn't want you to under budget it, and I didn't want you to under schedule it. So he just completely left it blank. 5 pages, figure it out. Um, so, yeah, that was the first thing. And the second thing was, Rowdy Roddy was a classic, guy, and I don't know, that was just a lot of fun. And Keith David is a fantastic actor too, and he toughened up big time, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Talk about and that was also a little bit of a prophetic film in terms of the whole message that John was trying to convey there.
Oh yeah,
And he hadn't been particularly political, I guess you'd say, historically, but his message in this film is something that now, especially in this day and age, really resonates with a lot of people. And
well,
it's
the other
become,
thing is you still see people walking around with hats that say obey on them.
yeah,
That's directly out of that. So yeah, I that's strange. I didn't think of it that way, but yeah, John was making a statement with this movie for sure, which I don't even recall at the time. I mean, it was just for us, it was a movie, so I wasn't thinking too deeply into it. But yeah, I see what you mean.
sure.
Yeah.
So, Big Trouble, as you were working on preparing for the film, and you just mentioned that fight sequence from They Live, 5 blank pages. I just don't want you to under budget it. How do you budget time and make sure? I understand John knew what he wanted to shoot, but in terms of making sure that you had enough time for all of the stunts and all the effects work that was necessary here, how did you guys make that happen on a schedule when you had so much happening all the time in this picture, from visual effects through to the martial arts stuff?
Well, I think the biggest component of that is the fact that we had done so many movies together, so we know exactly, how much time it's going to take to do what. So it's not as difficult as it sounds. Roland Emmerich has a great saying, which is, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So you just have to say, okay, here's $3 million. We can probably afford to shoot 30 days, maybe 25, maybe 6 weeks, maybe 5 or 6 weeks. Let's start with 6 weeks, and if we can't do it, we'll bring it down to 5. And then you go, and you just sort of say, well, we need this much time for that, and that. So that leaves 3 days for the fight. Now, how do we maximize that time on the fight, and how much rehearsal do we need to get into so that we know exactly what we're doing, so we're not wasting time on the day figuring out what the fight is? And so a lot of the pre-production time was really spent choreographing that fight, and Roddy and Keith, rehearsing, and stunt guys rehearsing. But those are 99% of that stuff is those two actors. That's what's cool about it. In fact, they may even be 100%. I don't remember at the moment, but they were both doing it, and that's one of the hallmark of John Carpenter too is every insert probably has the real person there, and he tilts up from the insert up to their face and that kind of stuff. So, yeah,
James Liu as the martial arts coordinator, certainly had his hands full. Did what was his interaction like with you guys and with John on set? And how did he fit into the family that you guys had built and been carrying for so many years? Like, what was it like working with James?
Well, the first thing that makes life easy for everybody is if the person is a nice person. James is an extremely nice guy, so it was pretty easy. Has an infectious smile. He knew what he was doing, and so it was like, um, I think it was we realized early on that these guys were professionals, especially the guys that we hired for the three roles, um, and that we were going to just have a lot of rehearsal time so everybody knew what everybody was going to do. So that was key to us, is to have all the stunt people and the actors rehearsing before we actually got to the scenes, so that everybody knew what was going to happen, and so we were efficient in the shooting process. And
One
well,
thing
to
I
answer your question, I don't know if I answered your question or not. James fit in quite nicely because he was bringing something that nobody in our camp knew anything about. So it was easy, for him to like be a part of it because we were dependent on him for answers.
this sequence here, the moving into the big climax, which is to be the wedding and then the sacrifice, brings everyone together, literally everyone together, just about in the film into the same room. And James Hong has said that this stunt coming down the the steps here where he's floating was a bit challenging for him. What There's so much choreography involved with this piece and the way that it's all coming together here. What do you remember about shooting this big final sequence?
It's sort of amazing that you should say that because I don't remember his part of coming down the steps was challenging. I think it was just a big escalator, as I recall. Um,
He said that it was challenging in the sense that he had, because of the outfit that he had on, and he had some platform type
Yeah,
shoes or
yeah,
boots.
yeah. Probably that's probably the answer. That's what he was talking about. Was yeah, he had to stand in on that moving escalator. Not very comfortably in shoes or his wardrobe. So, yeah, I suppose it was a challenge for him. It didn't look like that much big deal to us, if you know what I mean. It wasn't
Right.
like it wasn't like, oh, hey, you just got to ride down an elevator, man. Come on, uh, sort of stuff like that. And there's a pretty funny story about me during the shooting of this. That big monster guy, the Chewbacca-looking guy. Uh,
Yeah.
we were up on this like the second floor, third floor of this big set that we had, and we had a big crash pad down below. And the guy was supposed to jump down the hole, and he was a little leery of it because he couldn't fit the mask and all that. And I just went, no, what's the problem here? And I just dropped my radio and jumped through the hole and landed on the mat. Of course, I got a standing ovation for it, but and I was showing off a bit, but it was like, hey, come on, dude, what do you have to do? You just said there's a big pad down there. He was trying to make it more than it was, which happens a lot too. Um, so that part I do remember. Yeah, I do. You know what? I don't recall this. We had all those people in there for that. Pretty cool.
Yeah, it's such a huge set. I mean, this must have
Yeah, it
been the
was
biggest
big. Yeah,
big stage.
yeah. Well,
And
I
there,
forgot.
I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but there are actually action figures now of Jack Burton and of Lopan, and so this continues to this day to really resonate with people. What do you think it is about this movie that has lent itself to the enduring legacy that it has?
That's a tough question. I think it's because it is cool. Okay, you look at the imagery and all this stuff, and those guys with all those weird
It's beautiful.
hatchets and stuff, and look at the costume she's got on, and then these guys don't know what they're doing, and they're gonna screw something up any minute, anytime you know it. And then there's all this Chinese, stuff going on, not medicine, but voodoo, um, and I don't know, it's just all cool, and the characters are cool. I mean, James Hahn's very cool. Um, Susie Pie was fantastic, and of course Kim's great, and those outfits and this thing here. Actually, I didn't think that looks very great now. It did on the day, but see, see, it's just cool, don't you think? It's just cool.
Well,
That's why
absolutely.
that's
Yeah.
why it's
And
enduring.
that's what
Yeah,
it really is. Oh, here's where he knocks himself out.
yeah, it's like classic.
It because of all the different elements here that it offers something for people of just about any genre, from romance to action to martial arts to horror. There's monsters in it. There's
Yeah,
special effects. There's the stunt work. It is really an all-inclusive film, and it never lets up. And
there's
it
James Lee right
also
there.
it doesn't do a lot of things that are obvious. And this is something that I think is another hallmark of what John does, is that he makes movies that you're that aren't typical to whatever genre they may be attached to. But again, I don't think this one even belongs in a genre. It's so hard to define what it would be, which is something that Kurt even said at one point. He said, "This is a difficult picture to sell because it's really hard to explain."
Yeah,
But I really think that when people find it, they have no idea what's in store for them. And then it's such a blast from front to back that you just I still watch this to this day as I'm doing all these other extras here and having to have all these conversations. I have yet to become tired of this movie in any sense. It's still just as thrilling for me as it was then. Are you able to watch this stuff
I'm watching it
and
right
have
now, and I'm
think,
actually getting excited about the fact that this stuff really looks great. It looks very cool.
yeah,
Um, and when you watch some of these martial arts movies, they this kind of like this looks like it's really real, and these actors are really going through this process, and that sort of stuff, and it's like real. I mean, it's really cool. Um, I've forgotten all of it. I haven't forgotten
well, so
all of it, but yeah, I can remember, putting the guy on wires and waiting 3 hours and all that kind of shit. But nobody wants to hear that stuff. Um,
well, no, people do that. They eat that up. This is a clever little
yeah,
trick that he has here with his boots. You mentioned several times throughout this that, of course, not everyone's nice on set. Not everyone's whatever. You've moved through a lot of different films over the years. You've done so much after you stopped, or not stopped, but after the last time you worked with John.
mhm.
And I'm curious, did you ever? Who are some of your favorite people to work with? So your favorite directors after him?
Well,
You
obviously,
know,
I for a while I was alternating back and forth with Tim Burton and Joe Johnston. I did Jumanji and I did Rocketeer with Joe. Um,
yeah,
and I did October Sky, which is a really nice little movie. And then with Tim, so I was going back and forth between them for a while, and because I Batman Returns and then Mars Attacks and Sleepy Hollow, um, so I was having all these different experiences back and forth, and it's really difficult for me to say who's my favorite, this or that. It's really hard. And then right after that, I did an Ang Lee movie called The Hulk. So, and then Roland Emmerich entered into I did 3 movies with Roland too. So they're all different personalities. They all approach it in a different way, and always in a really interesting way. So it's difficult to say who are my favorite people. I've had a fantastic career in terms of the people that I've worked with and how lucky I've been. I've had no big real giant issues, and it's been a really good ride for me.
yeah.
Dean is one of my favorite people. From the Carpenter camp, I'm still almost on a daily basis because we're both diehard San Francisco Giants fan. The gaffer on the movie, Mark Walthauer, and I almost communicate daily about that. And the sound mixer on that movie, Tommy Causey, he and I play golf together a lot. So there's still relationships that I have from those movies, the whole John thing. But also, like I said, I've had a career after that with these other directors that's been also as sweet.
Have you ever had any idea of, or any leaning toward moving into directing yourself, or maybe even stepping back in front of the camera again, like you were when you first got involved with the business?
The only reason I was ever in front of the camera is for some specific stupid reason. Uh, I was in They Live because John thought it would be funny if I played a gay guy on a rooftop, and the other guy there is the director of photography, Gary Kibbe.
Yeah.
Um, I had a line in a movie called Black Sunday only because we only had so many passes to the Super Bowl, so I had to do that because I had to be the guy that was rounding Robert Shaw around the Orange Bowl.
Hmm.
I was in the Thing because we only had 12 passes to be on the top of the glacier, so I had to play the guy hanging out of the helicopter. Um, and then Joe looked at me one day and says, "You got to be the air race announcer." Because I was all day long, talking to the extras on the microphone, so I ended up doing that. On Batman Begins, Chris saw me and said, because he was having all these stunt guys do all this stuff in the car, and it just wasn't working out. And he says, "Can you do this?" I says, "Yeah, I can do some of that stuff." And so, sure enough, I ended up in the movie. In fact, I saved the day, I think, on Batman Begins and the chase in the end, because I'm the guy that says, "No, he's not on the streets; he's on the rooftops." Um, it's all been by chance. No, have I ever wanted to be in front of the camera? No. It's. I mean, if somebody offered me something, of course I'd do it. But I'm not that guy. I can't do that. And no, I've never, ever, ever wanted to direct anything. I'm not that guy. I have difficulty creating stuff out of thin air, and I'm basically, what do you need, and I'll get it there for you, and that sort of thing. I pride myself in being able to follow a vision and support it with everything I've got and everything the studio has. By the way, take all their money and put it on the screen if I can.
Yeah. Yeah. What would you say are some of the most valuable lessons that you've learned? It was such a diverse array of projects and people that you worked with, budget scales, everything else. What are some of the lessons that you would hand down to someone?
Well, I think I get asked this question, quite a bit actually. The very most important thing that I can think of is that you have to pay attention. And by that, I mean you have to be in every meeting. And when I say be in every meeting, I mean pay attention to what's being said by everybody in the meeting. You have to pay attention. You cannot let your mind wander. You cannot go off in the corner and get on your phone. You can't do this. You can't do that. You have to be present whenever you're working on a movie, or especially on a movie set. You have to be 100% present. That's the biggest lesson I can tell everybody. And the second one is don't ask the question until you need to know the answer. Because almost 95% of the time, the question that you want to ask doesn't need to be asked at that moment. And second to that, it's going to be answered somehow else without you having to ask it and make an idiot out of yourself and annoying people. So those are the two things that I think are important, is to know when to say what you need to say or find out the information that you need to find out, and pay attention. That's it. Pay attention is a big one. And I do some chats with college classes and things like that, and basically, that's my mantra. Pay attention, and you see I'm watching the class and people are looking, and I said, look, there's only 3 people of the 30 of you that are really listening to what I'm saying right now. That's what I mean by paying attention. And it's that guy, and this guy. So, it's sort of like that. People don't understand, I think, really how important it is to be present and be involved in the movie making process. And that's the only way you can advance is to really be there and pay attention.
There's so many. I was talking with Elijah Wood uh, earlier today, actually, and he got into the business when he was very young. And we were talking about maturity and what has attracted him to a lot of the more unusual roles and things that he's played. And he made an interesting point to your point, that was, when you're on set, it doesn't matter what age you are or what role you're playing. Everyone around you expects you to do what you need to do. There's no, oh, they're a kid, or oh, that's just a grip. I mean, everybody is so integral, and the expectation is the same for everyone to deliver and to do their best and to bring it to the table. It really is a symphony of people that are required to make this happen. And it's pretty remarkable how amazing so many of these things turn out, considering how many different set pairs of hands, how many different heads are involved with all
Oh
of it. It's
God,
really
it is.
amazing.
It's amazing. I sometimes I think what he said is the absolute truth. You know, you're expected to do your job, and it really stands out when you're not doing your job. I mean, everybody notices you're not doing your job. Everybody, even though they think they do, they really don't know what your job is. They see you standing around, and nobody knows anybody's job really, but they know when somebody's not doing their job. I can tell you that.
Yeah.
And it's the expectation of it. And that's what's kind of makes the movie business so exciting is that you don't last very long if you're not in it. So you have to show up with some goods every day, and it's an honor and a privilege to be making a movie. And you have to know that you can't take it for granted. You can't just go there to make money. You're there doing something else, and you're a part of a team that's bigger than you, and you just
Yeah.
have to perform.
At the end of the day, when you do all that hard work and when everybody has contributed what they can on the production and it's done, it's in the hands of marketing and all of that. Is that a hard moment as a producer and as a party to helping someone's vision be delivered? Is that letting go of a project and sort of handing it off to the production or the studio or whoever it might be? Is that a hard moment because you are throwing a little bit of caution to the wind there, like with Big Trouble, for example? How do you feel about how this was marketed? Do you think it was marketed correctly?
Well, obviously it wasn't because it was misunderstood. But the answer to your question is no. I don't really look at it that way. I look at it the other way, which is the glass is half full. Man, look what we accomplished and look what happened over that course of 8 months, 10 months, 12 months, whatever it was. And what a great experience for everybody. And you know what? If they fuck it up, they fuck it up. We don't care. We made the movie we went out to make, and we're all very, very proud of it. I think that's the feeling we all get at the end of the day. And those rap parties are pretty cool. And when everybody's getting together and going, "Hey, look at what we did," and especially at the a cast and crew screening when everybody's seeing the work on the screen, and because a lot of people don't get to see that, we like to show them the crew cut footage occasionally along the way so they get the idea about what we're doing, but they don't really know what to expect sometimes, and so it's really exciting to be. And you know what? The thing is no, I don't feel that it's sort of like lost that it's going to somebody else because that's that I look at it this way. That's not my business. I'm not there. I'm not doing this so that the movie can make money or it's going to be well received or any of that. I'm doing it for the fulfillment of having done it, and the accomplishment of having done it. Any movie that's made that you can see is a humongous accomplishment. I don't know how anybody, I don't care who they are, can criticize any movie ever.
Yeah.
So it's really irritating to me when a critic will say this or that about anything. It's like, man, that you ought to. Anyway, that's a personal thing about because I don't care what movie it is. It's not bad. Okay, it's not a bad movie.
It is what it should be.
They're all good movies, all of them, no matter what.
Yeah.
Because getting
Yeah.
them done is good. That's the only it's hard. It's very very difficult to get it done.
Well, the role of producer is really a remarkable one because you're facilitating someone else's vision and bringing that across the home plate. And so it makes sense. I mean, I love hearing that from you that the whole purpose, you're not even thinking about the financial consideration after the fact, that you just want to make sure that it can be done and that
Yeah.
it can happen. And obviously, the fact that these directors continue to come to you over and over again, you're not hopping around from director to director, or you clearly develop relationships with these folks.
Hmm.
And so that leads me to the question: how in touch have you been with John? When's the last time you saw him and had a chance to catch up?
Sadly, very sadly, actually, because now that I'm, doing these things and I'm recalling all these memories that, that we shared together. Sadly, I haven't seen John or spoken to John since the cast and crew screening of They Live, which was in 1988.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, very sad. Very
Well, it
sad.
is. I mean, everybody's so busy doing so many different
Yeah,
things.
you go off on your own thing, and certain things happen during the. It's just a weird vibe. Relationships change, and there's new people enter into the picture who want to do certain things, and and then part of that is taking some of the responsibility that you've had for a while, and then all of a sudden everything kind of gets weirded out and changes, and it's like these. I mean, God bless the Rolling Stones, but look at all these rock bands that can't keep it together. They just can't keep it together. It's just too
Yeah.
difficult, and there's too many personalities, and people change, and stuff happens, and people fall in love or they fall out of love, or what whatever happens, and there you are. Um, you're on this thing, and I was fortunate to be able to carry on my career without John, and he was fortunate to be able to carry on his career without me. Uh, so it's all good in the end. And one of these days, I'm probably going to do something like this, and John's going to walk through the door because he's going to be the next guy or something. I don't know. It might work out that way, but he hasn't reached out to me. I haven't reached out to him, and it's okay. I think about him a lot, and especially when I'm doing something like this.
Yeah. And the beauty of it all is that what you've created is permanent. It's always out there.
Yeah.
And it really there's a lot of magic to a relationship creating something, whether it's a couple and a child, or if it's artists in a film or an album, like you talked about music,
Mm.
that it's forever there, and it's forever a testament to what to the power of you guys coming together to make something like that. And Big Trouble, what we are so honored to be releasing this film and giving it the real deluxe treatment here. And I
Right.
was blown away when you said you hadn't done one of these kind of tracks before, because you have been a part of so much. And I have to say, this has been a real thrill to chat with you,
Yeah. Well,
Larry,
thank you.
and to
Thanks,
include
Justin.
you.
I haven't done them for a reason. That people haven't asked me to do them. Um, it's not that I try to. I don't definitely try to shy away from them, but it's just one of those things. Oh, it is what it is. When I get asked to do things, I do them, and because I want to be true to, I mean, look, you're out there doing a job. You need somebody to come in and help you with your project, and I just, volunteer my time. It's not that big a deal, but because I have to ask you something someday. Say, hey, remember that day I did the thing? I need you to get this EPK crew out of here right now.
Yeah,
Something like that.
sure,
We're all in
sure.
this together.
Well, I want to do so. Again, thank you so much for being
You're
a
very
part of it.
welcome.
I've
You're very
really,
welcome.
really enjoyed it a lot, and I appreciate the time.
Thank you. Thanks, Justin. Talk to you soon.